The Cybertruck is gonna have a 100 kilowatt-hour battery pack.
No way! That's way better than we expected!
Yes, and it will likely consume around 400 watt-hours per mile.
That sounds pretty good. What's the range?
It'll be a glorious 250 miles.
You mean 450, right?
Nope, if we estimate an energy consumption of 400 watt-hours per mile, that's 2.5 miles per kilowatt-hour. With 100 kilowatt-hours, that grants you 250 miles.
The efficiency, it's your arrow though,
Oh yeah. That doesn't make sense, does it?
I think just because Tesla motor is efficient, you'll get 500 miles with 100 kilowatt hours.
That's not how energy works.
But efficiency!
Hold on a second. We better redo our math here real quick. Alright, I should disclose from the beginning of this that I am a Tesla shareholder, I am a Tesla customer, I love the brand, I love the products, and I personally think the Cybertruck is the best looking pickup truck design of all time. Maybe the best looking vehicle design of all time. So iconic, so recognizable, and I wish every night that I could relive the experience of watching the unveiling again for the first time. Live demo fail and all. But all that being said, I kind of hated Tesla's publishing of the Master Plan Part 3. For one, I don't think we finished Master Plan Part 2, which involves making full self-driving 10 times safer than a human and covering all major automotive segments, including pickup trucks, buses, and compacts, which we're not done with that. And also, Master Plan Part 2 referenced letting your car go out and make you money autonomously. So yeah, we're not done with Part 2, which is why I'm kind of hesitant to start Part 3. But this giant PDF document Tesla published, I mean, I'm not saying it's false information, but they basically included a lot of data that was very, very easily to misunderstand, and there's little disclaimers and fine print everywhere, but the biggest one that by far is causing the most amount of misinformation and the most amount of false headlines is the idea that the Cybertruck has a 100 kilowatt-hour battery pack. I'm here to tell you that is not the case, and if anything, you actually should not want the Cybertruck to have a 100 kilowatt-hour battery pack, because what essentially Tesla was trying to do in Master Plan Part 3 is convince people that there's enough raw materials on Earth to convert all types of vehicles like cars and boats and planes to no longer require fossil fuels, and that we have enough lithium and we have enough nickel and we have enough iron to make enough batteries, and with the switch to heat pumps and solar and wind and having more low-cost energy storage, like a renewable future will actually result in us using less energy than what we use now. It's a more efficient future and it's ultimately inevitable. But personally, I feel like if you're a Tesla shareholder or if you've been following Tesla for a long time, you already believe those things. Like, I don't think Tesla really needed to convince us diehards, which actually read these publications and documents, that that was possible. And like, the people that didn't believe it was possible, they're not gonna read this, or even if they did, they wouldn't believe it because it's from Tesla themselves, which kind of makes an inherent kind of bias that Tesla doubters are instantly not gonna trust this information because it's from Tesla. But as far as just the Tesla community goes, we looked at this big document that went into the details when it comes to how big battery capacities are throughout major segments of vehicles. And the disclaimer that people were not reading in this document was Tesla was speaking in very broad average terms, very generic numbers that were not very specific. And for the sake of simplicity, Tesla included the Cybertruck in the Model S and X category. Model S and X have 100 kilowatt hour packs, so rather than give the Cybertruck its own dedicated section, they just included it with the 100 kilowatt hour section. But in that same document that people are using as evidence as this means the Cybertruck only has 100 kilowatt hours, they referenced that vans and light trucks like the Cybertruck are going to have an average energy consumption of 400 to 450 watt hours. So I'm willing to estimate that the van is going to be on the higher end of that average. But if Tesla themselves are saying to expect the Cybertruck to have close to 400 watt hours per mile, even maybe a little bit less than that, that still means that a 100 kilowatt hour pack in the Cybertruck would have less than 300 miles of range, and I personally don't think that's the case. Also in that document, they claim that all Model 3s and Ys are going to be lithium iron phosphate and have an average of 75 kilowatt hours. So I think the Tesla bulls gravitate to the positive bit of that assumption, which is that, hey, lithium iron phosphate is going to be on all Model 3s and Ys, which right now, at least in the US, there's no lithium iron phosphate in the Model Y, and only the Model 3 rear-wheel drive has LFP. The long-range and performance Model 3s don't have that, and all the long-range and performance vehicles have like 80 kilowatt hour packs, not 75. So it's going for this middle ground average. So on the bright side, yeah, we'll get LFP on more vehicles in the future, but on the downside, that will likely be less energy dense than the 2170 cells they're using right now. So if we switch all Model 3s and Ys to 75 kilowatt hour packs that are LFP, that's going to result in less range than they currently have. That will ballpark a 300 mile range, but not much more than that. So again, I don't think this chart was trying to reveal to us what all the battery capacities of future vehicles are going to be. This was just averages for the sake of making the math easier to estimate how many batteries we're going to need for the global fleet to make an all-electric switch. And because they don't get too specific and they're shooting for in the middle of, yeah, LFP for the Model 3 and Y and nickel for the S and X and Cybertruck, and yeah, the Tesla Semi is going to have an 800 kilowatt hour pack, whereas PepsiCo, who has actually taken deliveries of the Tesla Semi, they've told us that it's a 1 megawatt hour pack, not 800 kilowatt hours. So this is a lot of like way off into the future talk and broad averages, and because it doesn't get very specific, that's why I'm kind of annoyed by it. With the one exception of the compact vehicle, they're claiming that's going to be 53 kilowatt hours. For some reason, they got specific with that one, but again, that's not really a huge revelation to me. A car smaller than a Model 3 will use a battery pack 7 kilowatt hours smaller than the Model 3. If anything, that's actually a bit disappointing. I was hoping that the compact or the smaller vehicle could get maybe closer to under 50 kilowatt hours, but maybe they're bumping up against kind of the laws of aerodynamics and they can't really get it that much more efficient. So this whole chart I take so many issues with because there's a lot of just assumptions and generalizations. But the biggest one by far, because the Cybertruck has more hype for it than anything Tesla has announced, is convincing a ton of people out there that the Cybertruck is supposed to be like way more aerodynamic and way more efficient than a Model X. And just looking at the dimensions, I'm trying to tell you that's not possible. Like, just with that sharp angular roofline alone, yes, the Cybertruck is much more aerodynamic than a Rivian R1T or a Ford F-150 Lightning, but because of all of those sharp angles and because it's a much larger vehicle with much bigger mirrors, even though the latest pre-production builds are smaller than the original prototype, we can throw these things in wind tunnel simulations. We know for a fact it's not more aerodynamic than a Model X. Model X is smaller, Model X has a lower slope of approach on the front, it has a lower frontal surface area, and the back spoiler isn't as high as the giant tailgate on the back of the Cybertruck, and also because it's not made of steel, is a lot more slippery. That's why most sedans and crossovers tend to follow the smooth curvature over the roofline, unlike the Cybertruck, which has to be extra sharp for the sake of durability. And aerodynamics, especially at high speed, are your biggest limiting factor preventing better efficiency and better range. We've learned this thanks to companies like Aptera, who have the most aerodynamic shape for a vehicle that can sit 2 passengers next to each other. So just based on the Cybertruck size and the Cybertruck shape and the mirrors and the windshield wiper and everything, I feel very confident in telling you this is not going to get better aerodynamics than a Model X. And because it's an overall larger vehicle with larger tires that affect efficiency, and based on the 4680 batteries that they're currently shipping in the Model Ys now to everybody, those are not lightweight cells. Even though it's a structural battery pack in the Model Y, they're less energy dense because the walls of those cells had to be quite a bit thicker than 2170 cells so that the pack could be structural. Again, what I've been saying for a long time, 4680s are mostly helpful for Tesla. They allow them to ramp up cells faster and cheaper, but that doesn't make them inherently better for the end consumer. They might have a little bit better cycle life, and they might support better power output, or they might optimize better for the higher voltage in the Cybertruck, but the larger tires, the larger battery pack, the larger overall size, and that beefed up air suspension that is going to be way heavier, and the rear-wheel steering, which is going to be way more complex than what we currently have in a Model S and X, and that vault cover and the ramp built into the tailgate. This is just going to be a heavier vehicle with more rolling resistance and more weight and less aero than a Model X. And the Model X long range right now is getting 350 miles on a charge with a 100 kilowatt hour pack. But if you think Tesla's starting with the tri-motor, or are we going to assume because of all the extra complexities like the powered frunk, the armor armored glass and the larger glass because it's a bigger car, that this is probably closer to a 6,000 pound vehicle. Then in the case of the Model X with its more aerodynamic shape, you still only get 330 miles of range with a 100 kilowatt hour pack. So I still feel very confidently that if the Cybertruck is starting with a 100 kilowatt hour pack, it's probably not breaking the 300 mile range mark, and I don't think Tesla wants to start with that. My prediction is that they're going to start with a dual motor 320, 330 mile range, and that's probably going to have like a 120 kilowatt hour pack, which would just be very simple because it's essentially two 4680 battery packs from the Model Y stacked together, because that's using about a 60 kilowatt hour pack right now, especially if the Cybertruck wants to optimize for legacy superchargers, which are only 400 volts, whereas the Cybertruck is going to be 1,000. They could probably easily, with kind of Lucid style wonder box technique, cut the battery pack in half and just charge one side at a time at the lower voltage, so that you can take a Cybertruck to a V3 supercharger and still get 200 kilowatts or 250 kilowatts out of it. And then ideally V4 superchargers will be available and you can charge the Cybertruck probably well over 350 kilowatts. But my frustration with this topic is that I just see so many people in the Tesla community not acknowledging the efficiency equation. The biggest one, especially at speed, is aerodynamics, and then it's coming down to rolling resistance, which is primarily affected by weight. And with tires that big, plus the rear wheel steering, the vault, the steel, the armored glass, the powered frunk, and the overall larger size that is inherently less aerodynamic than a Model X, please try to prove me wrong on that one. Put a Model X in a wind tunnel and compare it to the Cybertruck with the mirrors, with the larger tires, with the windshield wiper. Try to show me any kind of scientific evidence that the Cybertruck is going to have a lower coefficient of drag than the Model X, and I guarantee you will be proven wrong. So no, I don't think just because in this very vague, very broad, generalized chart in Master Plan Part 3 said that the Cybertruck has roughly a 100 kilowatt hour pack. Again, that same chart is also claiming that the Cybertruck will have around 400 watt hours per mile energy consumption, which I also think is an assumption, a generalization. That would be evident of a Cybertruck with a 250 mile range, which I don't think is the case. And I don't think most of you even want the 250 mile range Cybertruck in the first place. So let's hope that's not the case. I think 120 kilowatt hours for a 300 mile range is going to be fine for the launch edition. And then once energy density gets better in the 4680s down the road, they can do a 500 mile range option, and that will probably be close to a 200 kilowatt hour pack, because I assume most of you want over 500 mile range, right? Because if you're just doing your math based on hitting exactly 500, then that means once you drive the truck for like 2 or 3 months, you're going to have some degradation, and now it's going to be under 500. I assume most of you were hoping for like 510, 520, and to get those kind of range numbers with the added weight of the battery pack and the aerodynamics of the Cybertruck, and they'll probably have 3 motors on the 500 mile range variant. Yeah, that's mostly going to add some complexity, add some weight, and I think 200 kilowatt hours is probably the nice, easy round number to just have 200 kilowatt hour packs stacked on top of each other. Keeps it simple for them, keeps it simple for manufacturing, but I personally don't think we're going to get that trim for a couple years, because Tesla's just going to focus on ramping the launch edition, which will be probably a dual motor with a little over 300 miles, but that's a lot of speculation on my part, and if you don't like speculation, don't watch this channel, because that's most of what we do. Feel free to speculate along with me down in the comments below, and thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos, so thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.